A ballistic missile fired by Houthis in Yemen has struck Saudi Arabia. This was likely not intended, but nonetheless, this is a grave escalation. And one thing is clear, even after recent strikes by US, Houthis are showing no signs of slowing down. Israel has also reported that Houthis have continued to use ballistic missiles on vessels in the Red Sea, even after President Trump's warning. Situation is so out of control that US has just announced that it's redirecting a second aircraft carrier, USS Carl Vinson, from the East China Sea to the Middle East to increase attacks on Iran-backed Houthis. This all raises two questions. I always believed that Houthis were a ragtag group of militias, but clearly I was wrong. They are a lot stronger than many people realized. In fact, here we have the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz warning against this exact assumption.
The Houthis have incredibly sophisticated air defenses, and they also have anti-shipping cruise missiles, drones, sea skimming types of attack drones, and other ballistic missiles even. They've launched dozens of attacks on multiple warships, dozens of attacks, over 175 on global commerce, sank multiple ships. I just think the American people need to understand what has happened here.
Clearly, Houthis are well armed, so I went to none other than former Navy SEAL Chuck Farr to break down how strong Houthis are and exactly what weapons do they possess. This is our new series, Downrange.
Backed by the shadowy hand of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Yemen's Houthi rebels have disturbed shipping lanes, defied U.S. military might, and thumbed their noses at international pressure. Despite American counterstrikes, including high-profile missions with carrier-based air power and B-2 stealth bombers, the tactical situation remains dynamic. The rebels' attacks are likely to persist, a testament to their resilience and Tehran's deep investment in this latest proxy war. The Houthis' campaign against merchant shipping is no ragtag insurgency. Their arsenal is a lethal mix of drones, missiles, and naval ingenuity. At the low end, they deploy kamikaze drones, cheap, Iranian-supplied UAVs like the Shahed-36, rigged with explosives and guided by rudimentary GPS. These buzzing menaces swarm the shipping lanes, overwhelming with sheer numbers. On the high end, the Houthis fire anti-ship ballistic missiles, like the Iranian-designed Mohit and SF, capable of Mach-speed descents and devastating warheads, delivering up to 450 kilograms of high explosive. Anti-ship cruise missiles, such as the Al-Manab-2, add range and accuracy, striking over the horizon targets up to 120 kilometers away. Then there's a nautical twist. Low-tech, explosive-laden unmanned surface vessels, essentially drone speedboats packed with military-grade boom. These slow-moving menaces, sometimes launched from Houthi-controlled ports like Hodeidah, rely on electro-optical sensors to home in on their targets. While less common, and only a handful have been used, unmanned surface vessels signal the rebels' ambition to escalate. Western intel points to a sophisticated sensor network underpinning these attacks. Coastal radars, surveillance UAVs, and small boat spotters relaying real-time data to missile crews. It's a poor man's high-tech terror, and it's working. The Houthis' targets read like a roll call of global shipping. On November 19, 2023, they kicked off their campaign by hijacking the Galaxy Leader, a Bahamian-flagged car carrier linked to an Israeli firm. Houthi commandos and Iranian advisors dropped from a helicopter, seized the ship, and rerouted it. Its 25 crew members remain hostages. Since then, the rebels have attacked over 40 vessels, with 21 taking direct hits. Take the True Confidence, a Barbados-flagged bulk carrier hit by an anti-ship ballistic missile on the 6th of March 2024, 55 nautical miles southwest of Aden. The missile sparked a fire, killed 3 crew members, and forced survivors to abandon ship. The Indian Navy's INS Kolkata swooped in to assist. The Rubimar, a Belize-flagged cargo ship, wasn't so lucky. Struck by a missile in February 2024, it limped for 2 weeks before sinking. The first vessel lost to Houthi fire. The merchant vessel Zogfralia, a Maltese-flagged Greek-owned ship, took a ballistic missile on January 16, 2024, while en route to Israel. It survived with no material damage or casualties. She was lucky. Other notable strikes include MV Genco Picardy, U.S.-owned, hit by a drone in the Gulf of Aden on January 17th, and the MV Islander, which caught fire after a double missile strike in February 22, 2024. The Sea Champion, Greek-flagged, and Nevis Fortuna were both hit east of Aden on February 19, 2024. The Morning Tide, Barbados-flagged, British-owned, and Star Nasia both took minor damage on the 6th of February 2024 in what the Houthis called a dual strike on Western imperialism. The pattern? Flags and ownership don't matter, Israel-linked or not, with the noteworthy exception of Russian, Chinese, and a few selected fellow travelers. If a merchant ship sails in the Red Sea, it's fair game. Western intelligence isn't guessing about the Houthi weapons pipeline, it's fact. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's elite paramilitary force, is the puppet master here, supplying hardware, training, and targeting data. The Shahed drones, straight from Tehran's playbook, smuggled by small trader vessels across the Gulf of Aden. And the anti-ship ballistic missiles and anti-ship cruise missiles, they were reverse engineered from Iranian designs, assembled in Yemen with Iranian oversight, and U.S. and Saudi officials have tracked this flow for years, using Navy SEAL teams to bust shipments of missile components and UAV parts trafficked in violation of a strict U.S. arms embargo. I'm Navy SEAL Team 6 Squadron Leader Chuck Farr, and I'm about to take you downrange. The Revolutionary Guard Corps doesn't just ship weapons, it runs the show. Analysts point to Iranian surveillance vessels like the frigate Al-Braz or the spy ship Bishad, both loitering in the Red Sea, feeding Houthi commanders real-time intelligence on ship movements. Houthi fighters have trained at Revolutionary Guard bases in Iran, mastering drone ops and missile launches under the Quds Force tutelage. Hezbollah, Iran's Lebanese proxy, chips in too, fine-tuning the rebels' tactics. And this isn't a loose alliance. It's a command and control network with Tehran calling the shots. But the U.S. hasn't sat idle. Operation Prosperity Guardian, launched in December 2023, pairs American warships, like the destroyers USS Carney, Stockdale, and Spruance, with allies to protect shipping. These Arleigh Burke-class heavies have swatted down drones and missiles by the dozen, from 3 Iranian UAVs and a Houthi missile on February 6th to 8 drones and 5 anti-ship ballistic missiles on November 11th, 2024. But defense isn't enough. Washington's gone on offense. Carrier-based air power has been a hammer. Since January 2024, F-35C stealth fighters from the USS Dwight Eisenhower have pounded Houthi targets, hitting missile sites and radar stations. On 9 and 10 November 2024, these fifth-generation fighters obliterated weapons caches near Houdia and part of a 7-wave campaign that's torched bunkers, launchers, and assembly lines. The Ike's Air Wing isn't alone. FA-18 Super Hornets have joined the fray, leveling coastal defenses with precision-guided munitions. And then came the big guns, B-2 stealth bombers.
Now, before moving forward, recently we crossed 1 million subscribers. Ever since then, we've been flooded with emails asking us questions and advice about growing a faceless YouTube channel. Even though I try my best to reply to every single email, sometimes these just take up too much of my time, or they ask the same question I have answered before. That's why I have decided to put all my YouTube advice into one training bootcamp for completely free. So if you're someone who's interested in starting your own channel, you can sign up for this bootcamp by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on your screen. There, I'll share everything you need and answer any questions you have about faceless YouTube. So sign up now because unfortunately, unlike the YouTube videos, bootcamp is more like a Zoom call, so it's limited to just 100 people. So sign up for a slot before it gets full. Now let's get back to the video.
On 17 October 2024, President Biden greenlit a rare deployment of these bat-wing behemoths from Whitman Air Force Base in Missouri. Their mission? Smash Houthi underground bunkers, hardened weapons depots, and other facilities dug deep into Yemen's mountain terrain. Dropping joint attack munitions, JDAMs, the B-2s cratered 5 sites, aiming to gut the rebels' missile stocks. It was a flex of strategic air power and a message to Tehran as much as to Yemen. We can reach you anywhere. CENTCOM called it a precision strike to degrade Houthi capabilities, but the rebels barely blinked. The Houthis control Yemen's western coast, from Houdia to Midi, giving them a 200-mile-long firing line on the Red Sea. Their weapons, though degraded by U.S. strikes, remain potent. Missile reloads and drone swarms keep flowing from Iran. And shipping's taken a hit. 12% of global trade once sailed the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, but now shipping firms reroute around Africa, and that jacks up costs and delays. Operation Prosperity Guardian has escorted over 1,500 vessels, but the Houthis still score hits, over 30 attacks since November 2023. The good news? Well, modern merchant ships are big, and fewer hits are causing only a limited amount of damage. The US and the UK have pummeled Houthi sites, 60 targets on 11 January 2024 alone, but the rebels adapt. Mobile launchers, hidden caches, and Iran's resupply keeps them in the fight. Washington's gunboat diplomacy, carriers, destroyers, and stealth bombers, it hasn't deterred them. The Houthis revel in the chaos, casting themselves as David to America's Goliath, and their morale stoked by every defiant strike. The Houthis, emboldened by Iranian backing, see this as a holy war and a propaganda win. Each attack burnishes their cred in the axis of resistance. U.S. counterstrikes hurt, but they don't stop. Tehran's too invested, and the rebels are too stubborn. We can expect more missiles, more drones, and more crippled ships. So the tactical dance goes on. Washington projects power, the Houthis punch back, and it's merchant crews that pay the price. This isn't ending anytime soon. It's just heating up.
This is exactly why when Houthis started attacking ships in the Red Sea, it had a devastating effect on the world economy. In 2024 alone, there was a $200 billion loss from the world economy because of these attacks and the reroutes that ships had to take around the Horn of Africa. Roughly $1 million of extra cost was added to each trip because ships couldn't use the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. This was the price that me and you had to pay and people around the world had to pay because commercial waters were not safe for commercial ships. This is exactly why when US started attacking Houthi strongholds just a few days ago, those attacks were heavy. Those weren't warnings saying, hey, stop attacking or we'll pick up the pace or we'll pick up the intensity. We went all out. We targeted their bases, we targeted their missile silos, and we targeted their leadership. Here's National Security Advisor Mike Waltz sharing more details on this attack.
These were not kind of pinprick, back and forth, what ultimately proved to be feckless attacks. This was an overwhelming response that actually targeted multiple Houthi leaders and took them out. And the difference here is, one, going after the Houthi leadership, and two, holding Iran responsible. It is Iran that has repeatedly funded, resourced, trained, and helped the Houthis target not only U.S. warships, but global commerce, and has helped the Houthis shut down two of the world's most strategic sea lanes. We have, Martha, 70% of global shipping is now diverting around southern Africa, adding to the cost of goods, disrupting global economies, adding to or shutting off supplies to the United States. President Trump has found it unacceptable. What we inherited was a terrible situation, and this is one of what will be a sustained effort to right that wrong and to reopen global commerce.
Now, another conversation that's been picking up, especially since US is now repositioning so much of the firepower in the Middle East, is US warnings to Iran. You see, it's really Iran who has been funding most of these groups. That includes Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthis in Yemen. Iran provides them with weapons, Iran provides them with money, and Iran provides them with intelligence. Then Iranian leadership tells them exactly who to attack, when to attack, all the while claiming plausible deniability. After the attack, Iran always has the same response. These groups are independent, and Iran does not know whenever they launch an attack, when in reality, that's just not true. On top of all this, on top of funding terrorism all around the Middle East, Iran has been also getting extremely close to nuclear weapons. And US has made it clear that that's something we will not allow, along with Israel and its neighbors. This was Mike Waltz's warning to Iran when it comes to nuclear weapons.
What the president has has repeatedly said is that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. All options are on the table to ensure it does not have one. And that's all aspects of Iran's program. That's the missiles, the weaponization, the enrichment. They can either hand it over and give it up in a way that is verifiable, or they can face a whole series of other consequences. But either way, we cannot have a world with the Ayatollahs with their finger on the nuclear button. We cannot have a situation that would result in an arms race across the Middle East in terms of nuclear proliferation. And President Trump is determined one way or another. Iran has been offered a way out of this to make sure that we don't have a world that can be threatened by a radical regime, not only our ally Israel, but the entire world that would be threatened by a radical regime that could destroy not only Israel, but its neighbors, and have the capability to hit the United States. Martha, we cannot imagine a situation like that, and we're not going to have it.
When Trump got in office, he actually tried negotiating with Iran on a new nuclear deal where they would give up pursuing nuclear weapons, and in return, US will lift sanctions so their economy can improve. But Iranian leadership denied that offer. Since then, many people have speculated that Israel and US may be planning or teaming up for strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. And since then, we've been moving more and more firepower to the Middle East in terms of aircraft carriers, but the official reason behind this is, of course, Houthis. But only time will tell if there is going to be a strike against Iranian nuclear facilities. So be sure to hit the subscribe button down below. If anything like that does happen, we'll be first to keep you guys updated.
This is Yemen, a country that's going through one of the world's largest humanitarian crises.
The country has been in the grips of a civil war between a Saudi-led Arab coalition and the Iran-backed Houthi rebel group.
Houthi rebels took control of the capital Sana'a in 2014, forcing the government into exile.
We're talking about 50% of the health facilities not operating.
After 8 years of war, could Yemen really be on the brink of peace?
You wouldn't expect it at first glance. Yemen has 3 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. Despite this huge wealth, Yemen is one of the poorest countries in the world. The country could have been just as successful as the other countries in its region, but that leaves one thing out of the picture. In Yemen, there has been nearly a decade of brutal war. The government and economy in Yemen have collapsed, with severe consequences. According to UNICEF, around 21.6 million people in Yemen are lacking the most basic necessities like water or healthcare. Like in most conflicts, it all comes down to politics. In the case of Yemen, this is coming from both inside their borders and from the outside. Saudi Arabia, along with 9 of its allies, are also fighting in this war. And Iran, although it doesn't like to admit it, also plays an active role. Unfortunately for its citizens, Yemen has become a geopolitical war zone. In this war zone, tons of foreign countries and organizations want their own piece of the pie. But there's a question to be asked here. Why is this conflict, creating one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes on the planet, happening in the first place? The story behind the war in Yemen is complicated. It follows decades of civil unrest in the country because of a political and religious divide. But the situation is also closely tied to a much bigger and lesser-known conflict, the Middle Eastern Cold War. Yemen wouldn't be in such a dire condition if it weren't for Saudi Arabia and Iran. In this video, we'll go over how this disaster in Yemen is the unfortunate result of the Cold War in the Middle East. And as an unexpected plot twist, we'll also go over how and why China is trying to fix the conflict. Covering war, especially such a brutal one, is a dangerous game for me, since YouTube isn't a big fan of content that's not branded as friendly. This is why your likes matter even more on a video like this. If you can just take a second and hit that like button, it helps out this video a lot. When we hear about a Cold War, we immediately think of the one of the last century between the United States and the Soviet Union. This was a struggle for global influence, as both the US and the USSR wanted to achieve global hegemony. The two nations were too scared to fight each other directly because, well, it would mean the end of the world. That's why they decided to fight proxy wars. They supported opposing sides in conflicts around the world to win influence. Think about the Korean War and the Vietnamese War as classic examples of these wars. Now, at this very moment, there is another Cold War going on. Saudi Arabia and Iran are fighting each other for regional hegemony in the Middle East. It's the same playbook as the one in the Cold War that we all know about. In all of the conflicts in the Middle East we hear about on the news today, Iran and Saudi Arabia are trying to support opposing sides. Syria, Iraq, and also Yemen are examples of such conflicts where the two countries are involved. The only difference between this Cold War and the more well-known one of the last century is that this one is regional instead of global. Before we dive into this Cold War and how it actually affects Yemen, we have to understand why Iran and Saudi Arabia don't like each other in the first place. There are two explanations for this. The first one has to do with religion. Even though Iran and Saudi Arabia are both Muslim countries, they both support different branches of Islam. Iran is a Shia Muslim majority, where Saudi Arabia has a Sunni Muslim majority. Now, the two countries don't dislike each other because they have religious differences, but they do have a disagreement on who is supposed to be the leader of the Muslim world. Iran's supreme leader, basically the dictator of Iran, has absolute control over his country. He sees Iran as the head of the Muslim world because it strictly follows the Shia traditions. Saudi Arabia makes exactly the same claim because it has the two holy cities of Mecca and Medina, and it strictly follows the Sunni traditions. But everybody knows that there can only be one leader, so this creates a lot of tension. The second reason for the clash between the two are their different ideologies. Since its creation in 1932, Saudi Arabia has been ruled by the Saud monarchy. Saudi Arabia's politics have been a lot more stable and conservative than of Iran's. In 1953, the American CIA and the British MI6 staged a coup in Iran. This was to protect their oil interests after Iran nationalized their oil industry. Yes, it's truly always about oil in the Middle East, isn't it? After the coup, Iran got a pro-Western monarchy ruled by the infamous Shah, the Iranian king. Many Iranians didn't like his regime, which led to the Islamic Revolution led by Khomeini in 1979. After the revolution, the pro-Western monarchy was replaced by the supreme leader as we know of today. He is the political leader, but also the religious leader of the country. And this is key to understand. His full title is the Supreme Leader of the Revolution. To this day, Iran's leaders actively support the Islamic Revolution both inside and outside of their country. This includes fighting against Western influence in the Middle East, led by the United States. Saudi Arabia's monarchy doesn't support this at all. The United States is their top military supplier. Saudi Arabia doesn't mind having partnerships with Western countries, but Iran does. The other idea of the revolution is to oppose what Iran thinks are illegitimate forms of government. A long time ago, Khomeini defeated the illegitimate monarch in Iran, the Shah. What Saudi Arabia doesn't like is that the government of Iran wants to do the same in other countries. Across the region, Iran supports opposition and revolutionary groups to fight against their governments. The monarchy in Saudi Arabia sees this as a threat, because it doesn't want to have some kind of revolution of its own within its own borders. Saudi Arabia is kind of the status quo power, while Iran is much more revolutionary. Both countries want to be the leaders of the Middle East, and they have totally different visions for the region. In many countries, this was a recipe for disaster, including in Yemen. Just like Syria or Iraq, Yemen is part of this proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia support different sides in the conflict. It's important to understand what they're fighting over, though. Of course, getting influence in Yemen is a goal in its own for Iran and Saudi Arabia. Yemen is an important piece of the Arabian Peninsula, or should I say a vital piece of the Arabian Peninsula. For starters, Yemen is located right next to one of the most strategic waterways in the world. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait is a strategic link from the Red Sea to the Arabian Sea. A ton of ships go through this strait because it's a fast way to go from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. Approximately 10% of the world's trade goes through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which makes it a $1 trillion asset. You can imagine that controlling the strait gives you a lot of power in the region and globally. When the Suez Canal got blocked for just 6 days in 2021, the entire world got hit with a nasty supply chain issue. And most of the ships going through the Suez Canal also pass through the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. Imagine what the effects of a deliberate blockade of the Bab al-Mandeb Strait would be. Because it's so important for trading routes, Iran and Saudi Arabia would love to control the strait in their quest for regional hegemony. Another important asset for trading routes is Yemen's main seaport, the port of Aden. If you want to get regional hegemony, taking control of important ports will help a great deal. And the port of Aden isn't just some port as you'll find anywhere else. It has one of the largest natural harbors in the world, ranking it one of the 5 best natural ports globally. Until 1950, it was the second busiest port in the world after New York. The port of Aden has a lot of potential, and that's an understatement. No wonder that Iran and Saudi Arabia take a special interest in this port. And of course, because Yemen sits right next to Saudi Arabia, it's an important piece in the Cold War. If Iran controls Yemen, it will have an edge over the Saudi Arabian military. A puppet state south of Saudi Arabia will give Iran some serious military advantages. It would be kind of similar to what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis so close to US territory, but then on a smaller and more regional scale. Obviously, Saudi Arabia doesn't want to have such a crisis happening next to their borders. And as Sun Tzu once said in The Art of War, attack is the secret of defense. So, Saudi Arabia sent troops into the country themselves. Yes, Saudi Arabia actually sent troops into the country. That is how far this Cold War goes. Let's look at the conflict in Yemen in a bit more detail. Yemen was already a failed state, even before the modern-day civil war began in 2014. In 2011, Ali Abdullah Saleh had been Yemen's corrupt president for more than 30 years. A UN report said he stole up to $60 billion during his reign. In the meantime, many Yemenis were impoverished and suffering from hunger. No wonder that many of Yemen's citizens weren't happy with their president. Therefore, in 2011, following the Arab Spring protests in many other Middle Eastern countries, the Yemeni Revolution began. What began as anti-government protests soon escalated into full-on war between the Saleh loyalists and opposition. Peaceful protesters were killed, and different tribes and militia were fighting government forces on the streets. In June, President Saleh was almost killed during an assassination attempt at the presidential palace. Saleh probably got the clue that his population didn't like him anymore, so he agreed to transfer power to his vice president, Hadi, in 2012. Many Yemenis were still not happy, though. Hadi won the quote-unquote election in which he was the only candidate. And it's not hard to win if you're the only one on the voting list. The situation once again escalated in 2014 when President Hadi decided to cut fuel subsidies. The Houthis, a militia in northern Yemen, decided to take over the capital Sana'a. The civil war had begun. The Houthis founded the Supreme Political Council and started to fight the officially recognized government of Hadi. The interesting thing is this: many countries, including the US and Saudi Arabia, believe that the Houthis are Iranian proxies. The evidence points to Iran giving direct military support to the group. The Houthis follow Shia Islam, just like Iran does. The supreme leader of Iran announced his spiritual support for the Houthis, but denies any military involvement in the conflict. However, President Hadi clearly doesn't believe this. He said that he would once again hoist the flag of Yemen in Sana'a instead of the Iranian flag. Unfortunately for the president, the Houthis weren't the only ones who wanted Hadi to go away. The old president, Saleh, criticized and denounced Hadi, just like the Houthis, and wanted him to give up power. Separatists in the south of the country who wanted to gain independence from the rest of Yemen seized the opportunity to join the fight. This southern movement was loosely allied with Hadi's government to protect the south from the advancing Houthis. But their new government, the Southern Transitional Council, took control over many of the provinces which once belonged to Hadi's government, which the president obviously didn't like. The terrorist group Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and the Islamic State also used the instability in Yemen to grow their influence in the country. Hadi's government had lost its grip on power, and the country was shattered into pieces. If you're not following this anymore with all the different groups and organizations involved, just understand this one. Yemen became a complete mess in a matter of months. When the Houthis threatened to take over Mecca and Riyadh, two cities in Saudi Arabia, the situation got even more out of hand. The day after that bold announcement, Saudi Arabia intervened in Yemen together with a coalition of 9 other countries. This includes the UAE, Egypt, Qatar, and Sudan. Basically, all of Saudi Arabia's friends joined the fight. The coalition supported Hadi's government and the southern movement in their fight against the Houthis. The Saudi coalition deployed thousands of troops and launched massive airstrikes. Interestingly enough, the US, the UK, and France all support the Saudi coalition in Yemen through massive arms sales. Many of the fighter jets, drones, and bombs come from Western countries. The West is allied with Saudi Arabia because they're enemies of Iran. And the enemies of your enemies are your friends, apparently. However, these arms sales are very controversial. Saudi Arabia and its coalition have repeatedly used these weapons to target civilians. They use what are called double-tap attacks. First, they strike military bases, and then they bomb the civilians who come to the rescue to help. Because of these tactics, what began as a Houthi insurgency escalated into one of the dirtiest conflicts in the world. Add to that a failing healthcare system, widespread malnutrition, and unhealthy drinking water, and the chaos is complete. By early 2022, the war had directly and indirectly cost around 377,000 lives in Yemen, and the country is still shattered into pieces. As you can see on this map, there are still 3 main camps fighting for control. The north, together with the capital Sana'a, is still controlled by the Houthis, most likely supported by Iran. The south is controlled by the southern movement, which has ties with the Saudi coalition, and the rest of the country is controlled by the official government of Yemen, supported by the Saudi coalition. You can't see these internal conflicts apart from the much bigger conflict in the Middle East. One side is pro-Iranian and the other side is pro-Saudi. That's why you call the conflict in Yemen a proxy war. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia would love to have more influence in Yemen. And perhaps more importantly, they both hate the idea of their competitor taking over control of the country. This is bad news for Yemen. The civil war won't stop until this Middle Eastern Cold War does.